Sanibonani, Sana, and welcome back to another breakdown of everything that went down in today's episode of Kwababa. If you thought the Mackay's household had already reached its boiling point, honestly, you had no idea what was coming, because today's episode turned the family drama up to a level none of us were prepared for. Grab your tea, get comfortable, because we are unpacking every single detail from this rollercoaster of an episode. We open at the Mackay's homestead, where the tension from the previous episode is still thick in the air. Musa, our beloved daughter-in-law, is trying her best to hold the family together, but it's clear that everyone around her is pulling in different directions. Musa has always been the emotional glue of this family, the one who steps in when things get heated, the one who tries to remind everyone of what truly matters. And today, once again, she finds herself standing right in the middle of a storm she did not create. The episode wastes no time reminding us just how deep the rift between Quibb and Zwelakhe has become. For those who need a quick refresher, Quibb has positioned himself as the self-appointed head of the household since the passing of their father, and he has made it his mission to strip Zwelakhe of everything he believes the younger brother does not deserve, starting with the family surname itself. Today, Quibb doubles down on this, insisting that because of unresolved questions around Zwelakhe's parentage, he has no rightful claim to the Mackay's name, let alone a seat at the company's leadership table. What's fascinating, and honestly a little infuriating to watch, is how confidently Quibb carries himself through all of this. He doesn't see himself as the villain of this story. In his mind, he is simply protecting the legacy of a family he believes is under threat. He tells anyone who will listen that he is doing what their late father would have wanted, that he is the rightful heir, and that allowing Zwelakhe to remain attached to the family name, and worse, to the business, would be a betrayal of everything their ancestors built. It's the kind of self-righteous conviction that makes for compelling television, because you can't help but wonder whether Quibb actually believes his own justification, or whether this has always been about greed dressed up as duty. The ancestral ritual scene is where today's episode really finds its emotional center. Quibb travels to perform a ceremony meant to symbolically sever Zwelakhe's ties to the Mackay's lineage, burning impefo and addressing the elders and the ancestors directly. There's a moment involving a traditional clay beer pot, the ukamba, that becomes the visual centerpiece of the entire sequence. Quibb handles it with a strange mixture of reverence and aggression, and when it ends up cracked, the symbolism isn't lost on anyone watching. Several family members in the scene read it as a sign, though naturally, everyone interprets that sign differently depending on which side of the family feud they're standing on. Quibb insists it confirms Zwelakhe was never truly part of the bloodline. Others, quietly, start to wonder if it means something else entirely, that the ancestors are unhappy with Quibb's actions, not Zwelakhe's existence. Meanwhile, back at the company, things are unraveling just as dramatically. Quibb calls what he frames as a family meeting, but it quickly becomes clear that this is actually a staff meeting dressed up in family language. He wants to announce a change in company leadership, positioning himself and, surprisingly, Zwelakhe as joint figures in a new management structure, at least on paper. But behind closed doors, before the announcement even happens, Quibb corners Zwelakhe and throws a pointed, humiliating question at him in front of the people gathered: what surname does he even go by anymore? It's a low blow, clearly designed to publicly diminish Zwelakhe in front of employees who are meant to respect him as a leader. Zwelakhe, to his credit, doesn't crumble. He pushes back, calling out how absurd it is that Quibb is fighting this hard over a business and a surname instead of focusing on his own responsibilities. There's a sharp exchange between the two brothers, well, half-brothers, depending on who you ask this week, where Zwelakhe essentially asks Quibb to just say what he really means instead of hiding behind tradition and technicalities. It's one of the strongest confrontations we've seen between these two characters, because for once, Zwelakhe isn't just absorbing the insults quietly. He's matching Quibb's energy, and it makes for genuinely gripping television. This is where the episode takes its biggest turn. The paternity question that has been simmering in the background for weeks finally gets addressed head-on. Mokosi, Zwelakhe's mother, is put on the spot in front of the family, forced to answer questions about who Zwelakhe's biological father truly is. And instead of giving a straight answer, she deflects, telling the family, essentially, to draw their own conclusions, because she isn't obligated to hand over the details of her private life just because everyone suddenly has an opinion about it now. It's a powerful moment for her character. For years, Mokosi has been treated as a side character in her own story, someone the family talks about rather than talks to, and today she finally reclaims a bit of that narrative control, even if it's through refusal rather than confession. Naturally, this refusal only fuels more speculation. There's a wildly entertaining detour in the episode where the family starts theorizing about how Mokosi and their late father even got together in the first place, with someone joking about a dramatically romantic proposal involving fireworks and grand gestures, the kind of over-the-top love story none of them can quite picture their stern, traditional father actually living out. It's a rare lighter beat in an otherwise heavy episode, and it works, because it reminds us that even in the middle of a legacy war, this is still a family with history, humor, and complicated love underneath all the politics. But the lightness doesn't last long. The reveal about Zwelakhe's engagement, which had apparently been going smoothly and quietly in the background, gets completely overshadowed the moment Quibb walks in and publicly calls the whole thing shameful. He doesn't hold back, throwing around cutting remarks about Zwelakhe not even being entitled to call himself Kotul's son, and then turning his frustration onto Mokosi directly, hurling insults at her character and her past in front of everyone. It's an ugly, uncomfortable scene, and it's clearly meant to be. The writers aren't asking us to like Quibb in this moment, they're asking us to understand just how far he's willing to go to protect what he believes is rightfully his. This is the moment Musa finally steps fully into her power as a character. Up until now, she's mostly been trying to keep the peace, staying diplomatic, encouraging her husband and his brother to find common ground. But watching Quibb disrespect Mokosi so openly is what finally pushes her over the edge. She turns on Quibb and, in one of the most quietly devastating moments of the episode, asks him how he can possibly speak on behalf of a marriage and a relationship he knows nothing about, reminding him that Mokosi is someone's mother, and that there is a way to address elders even in the middle of conflict. It's not a shouting match. It's controlled, sharp, and it lands exactly because Musa has spent so much of this season being the calm one. When she finally raises her voice, everyone listens, including, for a brief second, Quibb himself. The episode's emotional gut punch comes in its final act, when the paternity question is settled, not through Mokosi's words, but through a DNA test result that finally surfaces. The truth comes out that Zwelakhe is, in fact, their late father's biological son. It's a vindicating moment for Zwelakhe and Mokosi both, but it's delivered with such restraint that it never feels like a cheap twist. Zwelakhe's reaction isn't triumphant. If anything, he looks exhausted, like a man who has spent this entire storyline fighting for something that was his all along, and the cost of that fight has left its mark on him regardless of the outcome. And this is exactly why the episode's title hits so hard. After everything, after the ritual, after the public humiliation, after the DNA results finally proving what many suspected, Zwelakhe makes the decision that closes out the episode. He refuses to return to the company. Not out of spite, and not because he's conceding defeat to Quibb. It's something quieter and, honestly, more mature than that. He tells the family that he no longer wants to be in a place where his worth is constantly up for debate, where every achievement has to be justified against the backdrop of suspicion and legacy politics. For a character who has spent so much of this storyline trying to prove he belongs, walking away instead of staying to fight feels like a genuine turning point. Quibb's reaction to this refusal is almost more telling than the refusal itself. There's a flicker of something on his face that isn't quite victory, more like the uneasy realization that winning this way doesn't actually feel like winning at all. He got what he said he wanted, Zwelakhe out of the company. But the way he got it, through public humiliation and a ritual meant to erase his brother's identity, leaves a bitter taste that even he seems to register, even if he'd never admit it out loud. Musa closes out the episode caught between two men she cares about, watching a family fracture in real time over money, legacy, and pride, and it's clear this isn't the end of the fallout, it's just the beginning of a new chapter in the Mackay's family war. Mokozi, for her part, seems almost relieved that her son is stepping back from an environment that has done nothing but chip away at his sense of self, even as she quietly processes the public airing of her own private history. So where does this leave us heading into the next episode? Zwelakhe is out of the company, at least for now, but with the DNA results confirming his place in the family, it feels almost inevitable that this isn't the last we've seen of him at Mackay's Enterprises. Quibb, meanwhile, has secured control, but at the cost of alienating nearly everyone around him, including the employees who witnessed his outburst firsthand. And Musa may have finally found her voice in this family, but standing